The next part of setting up the gradebook for assignment points is a bit hefty, so I've split it into two separate videos. In part 1, we'll go over defining assignment categories, adding rows, saving your work, dropping low scores, and recording attendance and participation points. In part 2, I'll cover creating individual assignments and how to offer extra credit. Step 1 in the setup wizard involves setting your overall calculation method and defining your grading scale. First, you click on this link for Set Overall Calculation Method. Select Assignment Points, and then click Submit. You're taken back to the main Setup Wizard screen where you can see a few things have changed. First, we can see that there's only one red alert message now, and it's referring to the last remaining Y in the required column. Where we had our first Y before, it now says completed, and under settings found, there's a Y for yes. We can also see that steps 2 and 3 now have active links for define assignment categories and update the assignments. Even more links will appear in these steps as we progress throughout the setup wizard. The second half of step 1 is define grading scale. Luckily, this part is the same no matter which of the overall calculation methods you choose, so I put it in a separate video. Now, step 2, define assignment categories, isn't required if you're using assignment points as your overall calculation method. But if you want to drop one or more low scores, if you want to view the assignments by category, so all your quizzes together, all your homework assignments together, etc., or if you want to use the assignment builder to create assignments in quantity, then you do need to complete this step. For this class, I'd like to keep everything organized by category in my gradebook, so I'm going to go ahead and complete this step. To make things easier for me when I'm setting up my gradebook, I made a list beforehand of all my assignments by category. Here's my sample English 101 class. As you can see, my quizzes are worth 20% of the grade, tests are 50%, homework is 10%, and essays are 20%. And, keeping everything simple, there are 100 points total for the class. If you watch any of the videos for setting up other overall calculation methods, you'll see that this sheet changes a bit. Anyhow, back to gradebook. So from where we left off in the setup wizard, I click on the link in step 2, Define Assignment Categories. And I'm taken to the Assignment Categories screen. This first part of the screen is where I define my assignment categories. But we also have some sections below it for attendance and participation, as well as this table down here for saving my work and adding more rows. I go over these a bit later in this video, so let's head back to the top of the screen. The first thing you do is enter your categories. It says description, but I wouldn't call it a description so much as a main heading. And, just to note, a single assignment, such as a project, could be its own category. I can see right off the bat, though, that I'm going to need more rows. But here's where things get a little persnickety. If I try to add new rows right now, while everything is still blank, it actually doesn't work. Because if I scroll down to the bottom of the screen and click next to add more rows and click submit, I get a message telling me new rows have been added, but nothing happened. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter my first category, which is quizzes. And I'm going to use the drop-down menu in the calculation method column to select assignment points. Now what I'll do is scroll down to the bottom of the screen, and then I click Save and Stay, and then Submit. You might have noticed that Gradebook added a 1 here in the category display sequence column. That doesn't really change anything, but I'll go over what that means in just a minute when we're done adding our rows. You might have also noticed that there were some more NAs in this column, for not applicable, under category weight, and those disappeared when I clicked Save and Stay. But that's okay. Gradebook will automatically put them back in the next time you fill in a category. Also, you can see that Gradebook sort of read my mind and gave me another row after I clicked Save and Stay, which is handy. And now I technically have the number of rows I need, but I still want to be able to add rows the regular way. Unfortunately, if I tried adding new rows now, it still doesn't work, and I get that same message where it thinks it gave me extra rows, but it actually didn't. So what I have to do is I enter in one more category and select its calculation method. And now if I click next to add more rows and click on submit, now the button works. And now that I have my extra rows, I'm going to enter the rest of my categories. Next, I finish setting the calculation method for everything to assignment points. I leave everything as is in the column for category weight, leaving it as not applicable. And for these ones that are blank, I'll just leave them and Gradebook will automatically fill those in with NAs the next time I click Submit. This column, low scores to drop, is optional. If I wanted to drop one or more low scores, I would type in the number of low scores in each category that I want to drop. So for example, I want to drop the lowest 2 quizzes. A word of caution about dropping low scores when you're using assignment points. For the categories where you chose to drop low scores, each assignment in that category should have the same number of possible points, or the grades could be distorted. Excuse blank scores is also optional. I go over this step in a separate video. For category display sequence, if you leave this blank, then Gradebook automatically fills these boxes in later as 1, 2, 3, and so on, in that order. Let's go ahead and see that happen. I'll scroll down and select Save and Stay. And the screen refreshes and the boxes are filled in. 1, 2, 3, 4. But let's say I decide that I'd actually like my homework category to be listed first. I can reorder it accordingly. And if I click Save and Stay Now, you can see it reordered it for me in the sequence that I chose, and homework is now up at the top. This last column on the right gives us the checkbox if we want to delete one of our rows. Let's say I'd added a category for interview projects, but then decided I didn't want to do that this semester. I would just check this box next to the right of that row, scroll down, click Save and Stay, and then Submit. And we see that the interview project is no longer there. If you've already created individual assignments for a category and you want to get rid of the whole category, you have to delete all the individual assignments first before you can delete the category. I go over how to do that in part 2 of this video. Otherwise, if you try to delete a category that has any assignments associated with it, you'll get a red error message. I'd like to take just a moment to talk about this table that you'll see at the bottom of most screens in Gradebook. This Save and Stay button is your friend. Click it every so often and then click Submit to save your work, because otherwise, if your phone rings or an email pops up in your inbox and you reply to it, there is a very good chance that your session will time out and you'll lose everything you've done since the last time you saved it, which is not fun, as I have learned firsthand. So be sure to save your work periodically. The Save and Continue option also saves everything, but it then takes you to a different page. So if you weren't done with the screen you were on, you'd have to navigate your way back there. Insofar as these next two areas don't use the sections for attendance points or attendance percent of final grade. There are three different ways to give points for participation. You can do so from this section here, which I'll go over in a moment, or you can set up each day's participation as a separate assignment, and then these assignments could all be included in a category called participation. If you wanted to do it that way, you would come up here and create a new category, calling it, for example, participation. If you do it this way, with each day's participation as a separate assignment in the participation category, I highly recommend using the assignment builder in step 3 of the setup wizard to build groups of assignments because it will save you a ton of time. You don't have to define categories to include a participation grade. You could use the second option, which is setting up an individual assignment called participation. I go over how to set up individual assignments in part 2 of the video. You would just keep track of student participation throughout the semester on records other than Gradebook, and then record each student's score at the end of the semester in that participation assignment. The third way of doing it is by using this screen. If you use this option, you should note that participation is calculated as a percentage of the grade, not a specific number of points. So let's say I decide that I'd like participation to count for 5% of the grade in my class. I would just type a 5 in here, and an easy way to fill in this box is to set it so that students can earn 1 point per day. The points that are given per day aren't regular points. They only count toward figuring out how much of this percentage the student earns. So if you have 32 class days in your semester, for example, and a student participates every day of class, and you also have a research project worth 25 points, it's not like the student earned 32 points for participating in class and only 25 points for the research project. If the student participated every day, those points count just toward how much of this percent of the pie they earn. I go over how to record participation points in a separate video. So again, if you count participation using this section, this is a percentage of the final grade, not the number of points. So if you have 800 points total in your class and you want participation to be 4% of the grade, which comes out to 32 points, be sure you put a 4 here and not a 32. Otherwise, you've just made participation count for a third of the student's grade. For participation report view, the choices in this drop-down menu are the same ones you'll find in the display options setup screen, which I go over in detail in the video for setting up your display options. But just in a nutshell, unreported doesn't let the student see anything about this grade at all. Description only would just show that participation does count toward a student's grade, but not what their score was for it. And description and score would show participation and what they've earned for it. I have decided to not give points for participation in my class, so I'm just going to erase these. Once you're done on this screen, click Submit. And it takes you back to the setup wizard. You can see that there are now some new links in steps 2 and 3. Set category minimum requirements and build groups of assignments. These tasks are luckily quite similar for the different overall calculation methods, so I've put them in separate videos. In part 2, I'll go over creating individual assignments and offering extra credit when you're using assignment points.